Welcome, welcome, everybody, to this very special poker coaching edition of Tactical Tuesday. Today, we are going to be breaking down maybe a record number of hands. I don't know if we've ever broken down this many hands in our lives. Actually, we're gonna break down a hand that starts with a flop c-bet overbet. We're going to face a river jam with a second nut flush on a 4 flush run out. Always super fun. We're going to turn top pair, top kicker after facing a big flop c-bet with ace high. Going to check back an overpair on a connected board as the pre-flop raiser. And you're going to get the old flopping ace king high in a 4-bet pot IP as the pre-flop raiser scenario. So that's going to be coming at you in this poker coaching Tactical Tuesday edition. I am Coach Brad Wilson. I'm joined by my co-host of Tactical Tuesday, as always, Mr. John Chai. John, how you doing, sir?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing very well. Good morning to everybody here in the chat. It's easy on Tactical Tuesday to listen to all the episodes and think, wow, John, like, he always brings these hands where he just gets stacked again and again. Is he actually like good at poker? I don't know. So just wanted to kind of, give you guys an insight into John's abilities playing Six Max Online Cash. He's my most successful student of all time. I guess arguably. Shu's pretty successful as well. Both John and Shu, those are my prized pupils. We've had a coaching relationship for the past 3 years. John is, a partner in my CFP, so he's done all the things as it relates to student-coach relationship. So John is... Are we here? I don't know how to reset this thing. Okay, we're back now. Okay, good.
Oh, looks like we're back.
Thank goodness we're back. All right, so I don't know what you heard about John, but suffice it to say, he plays the sidekick dunce very, very well, but he actually is good at poker. I know that's shocking to some people, but if you look at his graph, he's very, very successful. So now, after building John up, let's dive into these hands here on Tactical Tuesday, and we're going to be doing our best to answer the chat, but we're not used to juggling 2 balls at one time and having a chat to answer to. So we'll maybe look at that after we look at each individual hand. Thank you to Poker Coaching premium subscribers who have given us this treasure trove of hands to break down and throwing us, all the challenges, the gauntlet. This hand number 1 is going to be quite an interesting hand, and under normal circumstances would probably just talk about this for an hour straight. So here, everybody folds to the cutoff. Six Max Online Cash. I believe it's 50 cents a dollar are the stakes. The hero opens in the cutoff to 2.5 bigs, and the big blind calls. Looks like the big blind is an unknown. And we get the 6-7 deuce flop. So hero flops the nut flush draw, villain checks, and now we're at our first decision point, right? We have just a total wide spectrum of sizes, I think, that we can choose from. So
yeah, this feels like a spot already, just facing check on the flop, that we could spend days talking about c-bet strategy here and what size to use. At the end of the day, I think it just kind of all boils down to there are lots of very, very good c-bet strategies for this flop texture, cutoff versus big blind in a single raise pot. I think the one that I used to use when I was playing 100 and L, which was not that long ago, it was like 2.5 years ago, would just be to start out with a third on the flop, and then use larger sizes on the turn and the river. So I think that's like one, kind of very standard way to go. I think you could start out with like a bigger c bet and construct a c betting strategy that has some bigger sizes and maybe a few more checks. So yeah, just infinite ways you can go on this board.
Yeah, I think what's most important here as it relates to the size that you choose, because if you go to any of the solvers where you can look at the strategy and you'll see that like there's a spectrum of sizing options you could choose from small to overbet. What's most important is that you choose a size, you choose a strategy that you know how to deploy and that you're not going to fail when deploying that strategy, right? So like instead of if the preferred size in a solver is 150, right, but you don't actually know how that size works because it's a rare size and you don't deploy it that often, then you're going to fail a lot as it relates to deploying that c-betting strategy successfully. So to me, it's always most important that you know what your c-betting strategy is and you know how to play downstream and you know how to play facing a flop check call, facing a flop check raise. You know what to do on different equity shifting turns after you c-bet a specific size. And I think that like we've kind of gotten to the point in solver land where it's like, oh, we have like 5 different sizing options here. Well, if you have 5 different sizing options as your strategy, your strategy is going to fail very, very often and very, very frequently because you don't know how to manage your range with all of those various sizes. So I think like the right answer here as it relates to like the sizing that you choose is directly related to your ability to use that sizing successfully on future streets and also know how to defend versus a spectrum of future actions after you use that size. And that is the most important thing here as it relates to what size you should use is your comfortability, your familiarity with using these different flop c-bet sizes. And like John said, a few years ago, he just bet a third on pretty much every board. I don't even think he had a big bet size on any board in the 2-bet pot IPPFR. And he felt very, it's funny. I feel like we're like making some kind of commercial. He felt very insecure about that, John did. But then he realized, one day, he realized like, I know how to manage. I know what to do on like all the turns. I know how to defend versus flop check raises. I know like what my range and what my strategy looks like holistically. And that actually moved the needle more than, using the solver preferred bet size as a c-bet, like understanding your strategy, how to manage it, all of these things. Just it's really, really, really valuable. And I don't hear it talked about enough.
Yeah, I think as I've played more and more online poker, that's like one of the things that I'm more and more sure about every day is that like the ability to execute my strategy is much more important than what the solver tells me the EV of my strategy is, or the EV of the strategy that I can't execute. And like ability to execute kind of goes hand in hand with simplicity. And I think like those are probably like, other than the strategy just being, plus EV overall, like those are probably the 2 things that I consider the most when I'm deciding what to do in a hand or a spot is, do I understand all the things that happen downstream after I take this action, after I c-bet this size? Do I know how I'm going to respond to a big check raise or a small check raise after I c-bet this size? Just like having the answers and thinking about all those things, I think is really important to just playing like a holistically sound and strong strategy. Otherwise, you end up in a lot of nodes that you're unsure about, right? You start out with a c-bet size here because the solver tells you to c-bet, and then you don't know what to do on flush completing turns or overcard turns or straight completing turns or board pairing turns because you maybe the only part of the node that you've studied here is like the flop c-bet size.
Yep, I agree, and I think that just to kind of hammer the point home before we actually look at the flop c-bet size that Hero uses here. In my jiu-jitsu coach talks a lot about simplicity and fundamentals as it relates to jiu-jitsu, and a thing that like people kind of overlook as it relates to simplicity. John felt insecurity because his strat was so simple, but whenever something is simple, right, especially as it relates to poker and fundamentals, there's a path to mastery. Right. So like, I think a lot of times we just think something simple and we're like, oh, we got it. So we move on. We don't spend enough time thinking about that simple thing or mastering that simple thing like pre-flop strategy, etc. And the reality is like when something is simple, there's a path to mastery. And when there's a path to mastery, there is no excuse to messing it up. And so I think we allocate just way too much time on the complex things and way too little time on the simple things, just, in general. So here we go. Hero's going to overbet the flop. This is, a strat that we do use, but kind of rare. It's a pretty rare thing. I think typically we are deploying the flop overbet on like 8 to 10 high boards, 8, 9, or 10 high boards. I think this board is like reasonable to start out with an overbet. It's definitely going to be a thing in Solverland, and this hand is a good candidate for overbetting the nut flush draw. So I think like I don't have any bones to pick with this size, other than just like if the Poker Coaching premium subscriber who submitted the hand, I would just ask them, like, do you understand the holistic strategy downstream after using this size? That's the most important thing in my opinion. So now the big blind calls, and I think that big blind calling here when you overbet is going to have a really big effect as to the type of hands that they continue with. So like essentially when you choose the big bet or the overbet here on 7-6 deuce with the 7-6 of hearts, your ace high equity is going to go down significantly compared if you would have bet a third. If you bet a third, your ace high is going to have a fair amount of equity at showdown. Like you could probably check the turn and bluff catch rivers if you really wanted to with ace high, depending on the run out at some frequency. But when you start out with overbet, now the value of your ace high has just kind of plummeted substantially. And this 8 is probably a donkable card for the big blind. Like this is a card that like just the hands that they defend facing that flop big bet. This card is going to improve very, very many of them. So it's like it's pretty favorable to the big blind, and also not super favorable to the hero, because hero, a big part of the overbet flop strat for hero is going to be the overpairs, and this 8 is going to reduce the equity that their overpairs have.
Yeah, if we think about the hands that the big blind is going to call facing the big bet, it's probably going to be lots of hands like front door draws, heart draws, 4-5, 8-9, maybe a hand like 9-10 even, 10-8, 7-8, probably hands like strong top pairs like 7x, and then whatever overpairs they don't 3-bet pre-flop, which can include like 8s and 9s, I guess, given that this is a cutoff open.
Yep.
So yeah, this turn overall I think is just, like Brad said, is pretty bad for our range, but especially bad when we start out with flop overbet. So that would be like the first thing that, or the thing that I'm keeping in the forefront of my mind facing whatever the big blind decides to do here.
Oh, I would thank my lucky stars if they check the turn and probably end up just checking back like most hands in my range that aren't like, I think my value bet, the worst hand that I would value bet here would be, oh God, 6-7 probably top 2. Yeah, I think top 2. Potentially 9s. I guess like an overpair that also has the open ender and blocks their straights might make it in there, or 10s maybe, since 10s don't block 8-9 the open ender. But I would not bet aces, kings, queens, jacks, or aces, kings, queens, or jacks. So like my value bet would be threshold would be pretty high here. And I don't think I would bet like ace 5 of hearts. I think if I did bet with the low equity portion of my range, it would be something like ace 4 of clubs, ace 5 of clubs maybe. So like a flop backdoor. Some sort of like backdoor flush draw on the flop that I decide to chunk into my overbet range, and then also bet the turn.
Yeah, I think I categorize those hands as like bluffs that are not painful to bet fold on the turn.
Yeah.
And ace 5 would be a very, very painful hand to, get check jammed on, or check. I guess check raise is fine depending on the size that you pick, as long as they don't jam. But, for example, going big here with ace 5 getting jammed on would be just horrific. And so we want to make sure that when we are c-betting the turn, that we're not forced to fold out huge amounts of equity like this combo draw here, and that when we do fold, it's going to be like relatively low equity hands like ace 4 of clubs, just a overcard and a gutter or something like that. That's likely doing very, very poorly versus their check raising range.
Yes. So with all of this said, on deuce 6-7, 8 with the 6-7 of hearts, hero has ace 5 of hearts, I would be checking the turn. Hero here decides to go for big overbet, almost 2x. It's like 175%er. That is a chunky overbet. And I think like one thing that you mentioned here as it relates to facing a check raise, that you don't want to fold your equity. Hero actually chose a size where villain's only reasonable raise size would be jam, which is an utter disaster here with the ace five of hearts. Like facing a jam would be like the last thing that you would want to face in this spot. And so when you create a scenario where the out of position player is only going to have when they raise, they're only going to jam, that is like quite the bad spot with ace five of hearts. So I would not do this. At least with this hand.
I think out of like all the sizing options you have on the turn, this size is probably one of the worst ones because of the fact that they can't raise to any other size than jam here, and they're probably very likely to jam, big portions of their range here that ace five is doing pretty well against. If you imagine hands like 7-8 jamming here, or 6-7 or something like that, like that's pretty terrible for us. And so I mean, it seems like the main lesson here is when you have a hand with this much equity, it's actually important to start thinking about like protecting your equity, right? Not getting blown off of it. And overbetting the turn here, leaving the only raise size for the big blind to be jam, is sort of like the opposite of protecting your equity. You're putting it, as far out at risk as you can pretty much possibly put it out.
Yeah.
And so those are the reasons why like I'd be happy to maybe not even go this big, but just like big bet a hand like ace four, where if I get check raised or jammed on, it's a very, very easy fold, and save like the very high equity combo draws, or just very high equity draws as a flop check back. And once I overbet the flop, I actually feel pretty good about checking back like even strong flush draws and stuff. Like one of the components, or one of the factors, downstream factors that comes into play once you overbet the flop, is that you've already folded out all of their air. You just like don't have very many fold targets once they check call overbet on the flop and the turn is an 8. So like I'm pretty like hard pressed here to like think of a hand that's going to call overbet on the flop and then fold to an overbet on the turn 8. Maybe like if you get really lucky with like 7x, like finding a fold here or something like that, that's what you end up targeting. Right. But I think even fold targets here for this size are pretty narrow. Right.
And like when you 2x, when you 2x, essentially like you're trying to generate, in this case, they have a lot of equity, so it's not so much like 60% folds, but it's going to be like 45% folds or 40% folds. And so essentially like if you're targeting like 7x, so like what was flop top pair, you need 7x to be like 40% of their flop call range. And that's just like almost never going to be the case, right? So like essentially it's just hard to turn a profit with this turn bet, and you're putting your equity like super duper way at risk. We'll wrap this hand up because it's going to be pretty trivial after this. River pairs the 7 and they check, and now hero checks again. What happened when we overbet the flop and overbet the turn is like we have almost no available fold targets on the river. So like, we don't get to bluff ace high here, and ace high also just doesn't have much equity because of how big we bet on the flop and the turn, which creates like a really bad river situation for us where we can't bluff and we don't have equity. And so we essentially just like check and lose. So we do check and we do lose to the queen deuce of hearts, which is probably the most brutal hand to lose to in this scenario. It's a hand that would call the turn, but that would call the turn and fold to a river bet. One of the rare ones.
Yeah.
That actually beat us. I think like there are hands like Jack 10 of hearts would probably call the turn and fold to the river bet, but our ace high beats them. All right, so hand number 1, easy peasy, 20 minutes in the books. Let's move on to hand number 2.
I feel like we could spend like 20 hours on that hand, honestly.
Yes, we probably could, but for the sake of our sanities, we probably shouldn't. So hand number 2, 5-handed, heroes opening in the hijack with the king 10 offsuits, king of spades, 10 of diamonds. They face a min 3-bet from a whale in the small blind, and the reg cold calls 4 big blinds from the big blind. Hero calls. I don't think there's really anything to discuss here. Hero's getting just infinite to 1 on their money, and they have position and all these things. I do think like worthy of discussion, this reg flatting the 3-bet cold with the action still open generally isn't a thing. However, in these circumstances, I think it's something that, like, you know, I kind of see students do. I kind of see like wolves do occasionally, where they'll fold a hand that is like completely reasonable to flat with in the big blind here because they're technically calling a 3-bet cold. And I think that, like, villain being a whale here, you just need to have some flats, some cold flats of 3 bets to 4 big blinds. And like, you're protected by the hijack. You're protected by the hijack under 4 betting due to the whale 3 betting, because whales tend to call 4 bets very, very often. So here, like with King 10, 4 betting, not the greatest of ideas because the whale almost always calls, and now we're building a gigantic pot with King 10 off, and that's quite bad. So anyway, I think
Someone in the chat actually brought up a good point that this is like a pretty loose open to begin with, and I think that's something that I didn't even think about the first time around here. But like, yeah, King 10 offsuit would not be a MP open for me at 6 max. It's a good observation.
Nice. All right, we get a good flop though. The 10-4-5
Really good flop.
mono. So 10-4-5 of spades. Hero's got second nut flush draw, top pair. Just, they got the world. The whale bets half pot. I mean, I would be surprised if the whale didn't bet exactly half pot. That's a very, very whaley size. Big blind calls and hero overcalls. There's just nothing for hero to do here other than call. Just raising is pretty much off the table because you're not going to get called by worse. So hero overcalls, and they have a lot of equity. Turn is a king of clubs, so that's quite the nice turn. Hero turns top 2 pair with the second nut flush draw. So how could they lose? There's 30 bigs in the middle. Check, check. Hero bets half pot-ish. So 16 into 30. I guess we can talk about hero size here, right? Because I think like every action up to this point is fine.
Yep.
However, sizing here on the turn.
Don't like this sizing because of the fact that we're playing, mostly because of the fact that we're playing versus a whale. I think once the turn gets checked through to us like this, we just always have the best hand, or have the best hand like 99% of the time. So feel really, really good about value betting this hand. When I'm playing versus a whale and have a super strong hand like top 2 pair and I'm value betting, gonna be sizing up to as big as I think I can go. So I think the smallest size here that I would probably end up using is something like 70. And, you know, if I saw myself betting like pot or even like a slight overbet here, I think that would be completely reasonable. Lots of worse hands that we can get called by, lots of pair plus draw, a lot of combo draws that, you know, might include like the ace of spades or something like that, that we can target on the turn, and just really trying to go for max value here, maybe even set up for stacks on the river.
Nice. Yep. Chat says 2/3 pot on the turn. I think 2/3 pot is pretty good. You know, if you bet 2/3 here, like 20 bigs, you're going to set up a 1-to-1 SPR versus the whale, which I think is nice. So with that said, you know, I'll probably go like 24 bigs, something like that, to make it just a little bit under pot on the river for my jam. But yeah, with the whale involved, I would definitely size up on the turn. Whale folds, and the red calls. And Hero gets the jack of spades on the river. So congratulations, Hero. You have upgraded the strength of your hand. On every street. You went from 2 pair to a flush. Woohoo! And the reg donk jams. So.
Oh, come on. Not this.
The classic. The classic donk jam here on the 4 flush. I don't know that I have much analysis or things to say here. I think
just sucks, but we just have to fold.
Yeah, you just have to fold. Like you, even though it is the second nuts, the problem here is that you could have the nut flush, right? Like the hero in this spot could easily have the nut flush from the reg's perspective. And so like they just don't jam anything that isn't the nut flush here. They have to essentially call the turn in the hopes that the river's a 4 flush, while also hoping that you don't have the nut flush, flop the nut flush, or have had the nut flush draw in order to generate some folds. And that parlay is just not.
Yeah, I think like I would just simplify that thought process like even one step further. It's just like how does the big blind have bluffs here?
Yeah.
It's like impossible, right? They have to check call the turn with like something that's gonna bluff them. Like there just isn't a single hand that I could think of. Maybe I'm missing something, but it's really hard for me to think of a bluff that the big blind can have here. And again, like Brad said, this is a spot where we're protected by having the ace of spades in our range. So like for them to jam here is like especially ballsy, given that it's not like, you know, we're devoid of the nuts here in any way. And you know, when you think about that too, it's like, oh hey, like I have the nuts here pretty frequently. I can just call when I have the nuts if this guy it does have like a bluffing range on the river somehow. But I don't think he has a bluffing range on the river. This is just, I mean, what can he get to the river with that needs to bluff, right?
I mean, I can tell you, like, you know, for those of you in the chat, like I've been playing poker for a very long time. You know, I've been playing poker so long that like this hoodie is actually like carapace. It's grown out of my skin. It's not even it's part of my skin at this point. Like I have never called the bet on the turn, thought to myself, oh wow, it's really easy for villain to have the nuts on this river, and said, okay, cool. Now I'm just going to go all in. Like that thought process has never happened in my life. So yeah, looks like the most savage 4-5 of hearts. That would be the type of hand that you would need to find. You would need to find like a flop set or bottom 2 pair that called the bet and then didn't bet the flop, like bottom 2. Maybe
didn't raise the flop.
Didn't raise the flop. A flop flush that didn't raise the flop. It's just they're just gonna have the nut flush here like so often.
And even if they don't have it like every single time, this is a spot where like even if, you know, I'm getting bluffed here a small frequency of the time, it's like I'm totally okay with it because of just how hard it is to have a bluff here.
They need more than a 33% bluffs, right? It's like 34% of their range needs to be bluffs, and there's not a way. There's not a world where that ever happens.
Yeah, there's no can't imagine calling here with the king of spades and winning a third of the time.
Yeah. Oh, hero called. Oh, they had the ace of spades. Thank God. I didn't even look at the result. We could have looked like fools.
It would have been really sad if they just showed up with like queen jack here or something. Like
everybody in the chat's like, are these guys actually any good? And we break all that down, and they just have a bluff. Like, oh, I guess not.
That would have been painful.
Would have been painful.
Hand number 3.
Hand number 3. So, ace jack of clubs. You can break down the action, John. You can talk some.
Yeah. All right. Ace jack opens hijack 2.5x everything. Oh, sorry. Hijack opens 2.5x. We're in the big blind with ace jack. I was looking at the chat. Well, like you said, we can't juggle 2 balls at once here. Can go either way here with ace jack suited. 3-bet call. We're much deeper than usual, I guess. Again, I don't think that changes much, honestly, with ace jack of clubs. If I saw a student call here, would be fine with it. If I saw a student 3-bet here, would be fine with it.
All right.
And we decide to call. Okay.
So ace jack of clubs, 5.5 bigs in the pot. Flop is 7-8 deuce rainbow with 1 club. We check, and
It's a big bet.
That's big. Yep. So I guess this is first decision point.
Yeah, this is probably like close to like the lowest equity type of hand that I'm continuing. And maybe you can make an argument that a hand like Jack 10 is like lower equity than Ace Jack, but you know, you guys kind of get the point that like hands that like don't have a front door draw, these are like the lowest equity hands that I'm continuing. Hands that have, you know, overcards, backdoor nut flush draw. This hand also has like a backdoor straight draw too. So I think calling here with Ace Jack of clubs is the way to go.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm like, I think folding is like totally reasonable, to be honest. Facing the big bet here, out of position, facing hijack, big bet on 7-8 deuce. The problem is that like when villain bets big here, they're pushing a lot of equity, and like we like our ace is almost certainly good. The jack, I'm not sure. The jack also completes like 9-10. So do we capture additional bluffs on the jack? How do we even feel when the turn's a jack and villain bets big? Like, probably not great. So I don't know. Like, I'm facing small bet. This is a call all day. Facing big bet, I'm really on the fence with just the backdoor nut flush draw. But as John said, this is, our best backdoor draw. So
It's
cuspy. All right. Hero does call in this case.
I like it.
Yeah, John likes it. I'm less ecstatic about it.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah, hero turns to jack, so congratulations. You get your wish. There is now like close to 14 bigs in the pot. Man, there's 200 big blinds behind. Hero checks. Now villain bets like 75% again on the turn. Congratulations, you got what you wanted.
Yeah, I'm calling 75% on the flop with ace jack high. Probably calling 75% on the turn with top pair top kicker. Like you said though, I'm not loving it. Right? I'm like, okay, we're losing to like the hijacked value range here, very very likely. Right?
Yeah.
Like we're bluff catching versus their bluffs. We're not like hoping to beat any of their value unless maybe they start doing this with like a king jack of hearts or something like that has like a backdoor flush draw on the flop, or maybe just c bets king jack or something like that.
Scotty Meltzer
hopefully
asked,
he could also have hands like jack 9 and jack 10 that might value own themselves here versus our exact hand, so can't fold the jack here.
Yeah, we can't fold. Scotty Meltzer said, what does the jack captures 9-10 mean? I meant the jack completes 9-10. It completes the front door open into the straight draw. So hero calls. There's nothing to do here other than call and actually be like kind of very terrified. River pairs the 7, which frankly is a better card for hero. Actually, it's quite good for hero now that I think about it. So hero's like front door, like 7x of diamonds that would call the flop c-bet and then call the turn c-bet. Do get upgraded to trips. So I think the big blind here definitely is going to have a trips advantage on the 7. I don't think that the hijack is going to have 7x in the range other than like boats, like 7-8 or sets of 8s that are boats. So like I do think the 7 is better for us than them. With that said, how does that help us? How does that help our situation here? If the 7 is better,
I think it's good. I mean, it's like you said, just like reduces the value combos that would go big bet on the flop and turn, and that's good. I mean, we still have a hand that is maybe can beat some hands that like value on themselves on the river. Again, like we said, if like king jack and jack 10 barrel bet the turn, like I think you might find them value betting the river some of the time. Jack 10 maybe a little, jack 9 and jack 10 a little bit thinner, but like king jack I think can pretty comfortably value bet the river. And then we still do beat like whatever bluffs they have, right? Like backdoor diamonds that bet the flop, turn flush draw, decide to keep barreling. I don't know, maybe like a hand like 5-6, 4-5, like those types of hands. So I think I would just happily check ace jack here and bluff catch versus all the normal sizes.
Okay, all right, that's fair. I do think like you could. There is, I guess it's too fancy, and I think ace jack is just too strong. But if you had like jack 10 or jack 9, you could turn your top pair into a bluff facing like a small bet on this 7 river if you really wanted to get frisky. Just punish villains for betting their over pairs too thinly at this depth on a card that significantly, like it just gives us a lot of very strong hands on the river, and they don't have a ton of very strong hands on the river. So you could check jam with like jack 10 jack 9. I just think ace jack is just too good to turn into a bluff.
Turn the jack X's that don't beat the king jacks or jack 10s, jack 9s themselves into bluffs on the river. Also, it's just nice when you have a 10 and a 9 in your hand. It just makes it less likely that villain has a straight to snap you off on the river with.
Yeah, hero led with ace jack 10%. I don't know. Maybe it's not the craziest thing. Like it could you know, it's a decent block. They get to over-realize their equity. They're probably not going to face a raise that often. Hard to get called by worse, but when you place a bet this small, I think that getting to over-realize is like quite good. So, and also you're kind
Over-realize
of
in what way?
like, well, you don't fold to a river bet. So like any size river bet.
I see.
And you're also like setting your price, right? Like you're setting your price here to make it to showdown. So I don't know. It's not a thing.
I would like challenge the over-realizing thing a little bit. Cause like I said, I was planning on check calling, right? So I was not planning on getting shut out of my equity anyways. And like when I can't check call, it's when I face like a really, really big river bet. Like let's just say they decide to go huge for some reason. And I think like that probably happens maybe at a comparable frequency to like when we block the river and then get raised and like are in a tough spot with ace jack anyways. So I don't know. I can see the reasons for like blocking here. It does like freeze the action. It does like maybe let you over realize like a little bit if you don't get raised. You know, if villains aren't raising here thinly with hands like ace jack or queens or stuff like queens, kings, aces, then like, you know, blocking like this goes up in value a lot. Yeah, but the downside of that is that you just have to remember that like when you block this, like you might freeze the action versus the overpairs, but you're also not giving hands like diamonds 5-6, 4-5 an opportunity to bluff the river themselves. And so like there is like a push and pull here with whatever. And then like the final thing for me, like the final decision here, like the final data point, I guess, or factor here that would lead me to like not really have a donking range or not block here, not lead block this river is something that we talked about in the ace five of hearts hand, where it just like adds a humongous layer of complexity to like your overall strategy, right? Like now you need a strat here for like facing a small raise, facing a big raise. You know, you need a strat for like what other hands do I like donk here that are not ace jack that, you know, incentivize villain to like bluff raise or, you know, call with a bluff catcher like jack 10. So basically like, you know, even with like a few future outcomes, you can see like how much extra complexity having a donking range here adds versus just check calling ace jack versus a range that, you know, I am very, very confident is going to have bluffs in it or slightly worse value bets. So yeah,
and
like I really like check calling here and
all right,
I love the donk.
So for devil's advocate, you know, I just made a course for Poker Coaching's advanced cash game course that's going to be coming out, you know, in the next month or so. And one of the lessons was a concept that is relevant to jiu-jitsu, kazushi. And I think like one interesting thing that could happen here is villain could have an imbalanced river strategy where, you know, somebody in the chat asked about what do we do facing a raise if we donk? Well, one thing that's interesting here is that like if the overpairs don't raise for value, then what does raise for value, right? Like you're playing this to check call and capture a bet versus their like busted diamond draws, right? Their queen tens or king ten of diamonds, those type of hands. Well, if this bet doesn't get raised by their overpairs, but then does get raised by their diamond draws, then, you know, you basically can place this bet, lose the minimum versus their overpairs while also still capturing EV from their diamond draws, theoretically speaking. So that's just another like sort of just thing that could happen here in this spot. But yes, as you said, like the complexity by having like a 10th pot size donk bet here on the river, if you're going to deploy it, then you need to really understand like how this node works and really have a good plan for what's going to happen when you face a spectrum of actions, and all while not blowing yourself to smithereens, which, spoiler alert, I think most of the times we just blow ourselves to smithereens here. But hopefully if you do take the Wile E. Coyote approach and blow yourself up, you use that as an opportunity to learn.
Oh, you get called. Nice.
Yeah, we got called by queens. So
okay. So if this is what happens, like then blocking ace jack for a 10th is amazing. This is just like, and this is probably like a little more of like, you know, having familiarity with the pool and like the players that you play against on a regular basis. But like if you feel very confident that they're just not going to do a good enough job of raising queens plus on this river facing 10% donk, then yeah, I would do this all day with ace jack. I thought this hand was going to raise river for sure.
They're deep, you know, they probably don't want to set up a situation where they face a bet 3-bet if they do raise with queens. So like essentially the allure of making it a showdown is just too high to raise with these hands. From villain's perspective. Like I have to imagine that's what's kind of going through their mind.
Yeah, I didn't think about all that, but if that's what Hero was thinking about in this hand and kind of using like depth to their advantage in that way, I think that's this is just amazing.
Yeah, that ace though poker says bet call seems bad to me. Reg bluff raises rarely. So like essentially how this situation sets up, if the reg is calling with their overpairs, that removes a lot of the value when they do raise the river, right? So essentially, if they're not raising with their overpairs, they're raising with their straights and they're raising with their boats. They don't have that many straights and they don't have that many boats, but they do have a large bucket of busted diamond draws or air region that they could essentially raise the river with, and they don't need to find a ton of those to the point to where like we get the pot odds to call facing a raise. Okay. So
Well played. Well played.
well played. 10%. 10% river bet block for the win. Okay, so here we go. We have the kings. We open from the hijack, the 2.5 bigs. Apparently the hijack is that's the seat that we play from the most here. Big blind calls. Flop is queen 10-8 with the 10-8 of diamonds. The reg checks, and now the actions here on Hero. Checker bet.
Could go either way. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think this board is like, again, if I saw a student check here, wouldn't think much of it. If I saw a student c-bet this board, wouldn't think much of it. It's like just connected enough where, I think you can start thinking about checking back hands over pairs, like one pair hands like kings. If this was like, I don't know, Jack 10-8 or something like that, then I think I'd be much more on board with checking back kings. So whatever Hero does here, I'm likely going to be okay with.
Okay. I actually like c-betting here with kings, I think, more than checking. We have like so many hands in our range that can bet call the flop that like I'm not worried about, just like I'm not worried about like protecting kings versus like check raises so much. I think that like on king 10-8, they probably don't have like queen 10 off, so they only have a few combos of queen 10 suited, and then 10-8 suited. They're going to 3-bet queens and 10s at a decent clip. 8s they probably have, so like and then like jack 9 suited. And then on the flip side of that, like they're going to have jack 10, they're going to have 10-9, they're going to have 8-9, they're going to have queen jack, they're going to have king queen. So like they have a lot of like one pair hands that we can get value from, as well as like, the ace jacks, the ace jack type hands, king jack type hands. So I think like just we have a range that can call a check raise, and I think with kings we can just target a bunch of like single paired hands, and it's not as if like playing turns and rivers is going to be like super difficult, right? Like, oh, the turn's like a spade. Well, we probably don't bet now. The turn is like a jack or a 9. Well, we're probably not going to bet the turn. Turns like a queen 10 or 8, we're probably not going to bet. Turns an ace, we're probably not going to bet. All the other turns, we're probably just going to keep betting. And then if like villain check raises the turn, again, like I would ask myself, where am I at in my range? Where's kings? Like we have jack 9, we have queen 10, we have queens, we have 10s, we have 8s. We've got so many different hands that we can continue with that like maybe kings just turns into a bet fold if they raise the turn. So yeah, that would be my strat here, but Hero does check behind, and again, I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with it. My preference would be to check behind hands that block top pair. So, queen jack, king queen, ace queen would be the hands that I would check over kings in general. Matthew Kagan asked what
size. Yeah.
Yeah,
go
big. 3/4 is what 2/3, 3/4. That would be the size that I would go for here on this board.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Turn is a jack. So, and this is another part of this too, where if you bet kings, then you can capture a bet on the flop at a very, very high frequency, right? Like every time they call. When you check behind and the turn's a jack, well, now you're not going to capture a bet, right? Like you don't get to bet the turn now. And so like the turn just going to go check. And so like essentially you've had a value hand on the flop that you could have captured a bet. And now you're not even going to be able to place one bet because the flop checked through and now there's a 4 straight on the turn. So that's just another like reason why I personally prefer betting the flop. Okay. So here on the 4 straight, the reg bets half pot. Hero can't really do anything. So hero calls.
Whoa. Hero can't really do anything.
He can't do anything other than call. Like they can't. Oh God. You guys let me know when we're back. This Are we back? Are we doing it?
If it says live there in the corner, I think we're good, right?
I don't know. We're back. Okay, we're back.
All right.
All right. So John, go ahead. You found something that's better than checking back. I didn't think we had an option, but I guess we do. And now I feel kind of silly that I overlooked it.
Yeah, I think so Queen Jack 10 is like especially good for the pre-flop raiser, right? Like we're expected to have Ace King. The big blind never has Ace King in a single raise pot. Ace King makes a lot of sense to fit kind of in our check back range on this board. We don't want to get check raised. We have some nut equity that we'd really like to realize, plus maybe some overcards. And then I think when you loop that in with what I imagine the big blind's turn probe range to be on this board, which I think it's going to be split between like flush draws for their bluffs, probably maybe some random draws that I can't think of. And then their value for this size, I think, is just going to be 9x. It's just going to be straights. And I think what I'm worried about with kings, what I can kind of see happening downstream is that like on a brick river facing a big bet, I'm just like playing this guessing game with kings where I'm just like, I don't know how many flush draws they have. I don't know if they continue bluffing with flush draws. Maybe they only get to the river with 9x. Calling here with kings could be torching. So what I'd like to do instead of play that guessing game on the river is raise small here on the turn. Probably get called by all their 9x. Hopefully raise small enough to get called by all their flush draws and feel very comfortable that I'm never going to get bet 3-bet on this turn with pocket kings because of that ace king advantage we just talked about that we have in a single raise pot. So my plan here would be to raise small on the turn, hopefully get called by the flush draws, and then check back the river and let them win with their straights and hopefully eke out a little bit of value from their flush draws and not play the guessing game on the river versus a polar bet.
Yeah, I really like that. You know, just essentially like raise small and again overrealize. Villains not going to be bet 3-betting this board, or at least they shouldn't be.
They just can't.
Bet 3-betting is kind of suicide as the preflop caller on Queen Jack 10. So essentially, raise a turn, check back river, and then you can also bet the river if you improve, right? So like if the river's an ace or river's a 9, then you can still bet. Mad Sox asks, what if they donk the river? I think if they donk the river, it's going to be on boards that change what the best hand is. So like a Queen Jack 10 or 8 or spade. And if they choose to bet the river on those cards, then we lose. That's pretty much it. Okay. Good hand, John. Good find. Good look.
And if they donk the river on not those cards, we jam.
Oh, God. I don't know.
All right, we'll save that for later.
Trying to fold out 9x. I mean, there is a lot of depth here. So, you know, maybe that could happen. If we go back to John's graph and look at the days where he decided to just raise facing everything every time, I think he would say that didn't end well. Trying to make
a little bit of insight into why so many of my tactical Tuesday hands end with me getting stacked.
Yeah. Essentially, when you try to fold out straights, people just don't fold them often enough to make money. That was the lesson that he learned. River's a deuce and villain checks anyway, so now hero just has like very easy check behind and loses to Jack 9 of spades. So yeah, really avoided the landmine of not c-betting the flop and getting check raised by Jack 9. Jack 9 here for all of you watching, I think is I don't know how to put it softly into words. So the softest I'll go is this is absolutely atrocious checking Jack 9 on the river here.
What is this guy doing?
Yeah, like this is not good. Spoiler alert, just not good. So essentially what happens is they're afraid of getting raised because the in position player has ace king. The problem is,
he got scared of ace king on the river. Like that's what happened.
Right. The problem is that ace king is still going to absolutely batter you when you check, and also Hero's just going to check back all of their hands that want to make it to showdown, like kings, when you check with the Jack 9. So yeah, it's Hero got super fortunate. The reg here, bet your straights. You should bet the straights.
Maybe not a reg.
Maybe not a reg. Maybe it's a generous tag, generous label. Okay, so we have a couple of global poker hands. We'll do 2 more, and then we'll call it a night. As we said, we're 4 hands in. This is so many hands compared to normal Tactical Tuesday. You guys are getting the bonus. There's so many questions too, man. All right, so I need to. This is John's graph for those of you. Need to change the size here of this window.
I think everybody is agreeing that at 100 NL, nobody folds a 9 on the river.
Dude, I don't know if people fold a 9 at 2K NL, like, because then they know, right? Oh, they're gonna rep ace king here like every time, right?
All I know is that they never fold if you never try.
That's a good point. They never fold if you never try. And I'll say this. I've seen people try to fold out big hands quite often, and sometimes they do fold the big hand. Like occasionally, I'll be reviewing a hand and I'll be like, "Holy shit! I can't believe you just folded that out."
That's what keeps the hope alive.
Yeah, that's what keeps the hope alive. All right, so there was one hand. This is it. The ace king. This fancy global poker replayer here. Hero Mike McHugh opens 2.5 bigs with ace king off on the button. Small blind tree bets to 10. Mike McHugh 4 bets to 21
nice.
bigs.
Good
job.
4-bet sizing.
Great sizing, Mike McHugh. You did it.
And we're not being sarcastic. I think people just 4-bet way too big in this spot and like do things like 4-bet to like 30 big blinds or something like that. But I think anything, between like 20 and 22, 23-ish is the way to go when you're 4-betting IP. So yeah, good size, Mike McHugh.
Well done, Mike McHugh. Okay, so here, flop is queen 10-8. The small blind checks. So first thing is a better check.
This is funny because we spent like, I don't know how many hours in the last month talking about queen high flops as a pre-flop 4-better. Most of it specifically in these positions. So what we spent like 10 hours talking about in the last week or so is about how the pre-flop 4-betting range from the button does not have queen X in it, or very, very little queen X, I guess, depending on the chart that you're using. Yeah. You got to be very careful when you're playing against, for example, strong studied regs who also know that might be in the small blind when you're deciding to c-bet these queen high boards as a pre-flop 4-better.
Yeah, like ace queen in general is a flat facing a 3-bet. But the small blind will have like king queen, ace queen, those type of hands. So like the queen advantage is definitely going to go to the small blind, as well as like 10 like sets of 10s and sets of 8s is also going to be in the small blind's range. So I would not bet this board with ace king high. Personally, as the pre-flop 4-better, I would check this one behind with ace king specifically. And what hands am I also going to check behind? Like I'm going to have a pretty heavy check range here, I think. Probably a fair amount of my like aces I think are going to check behind. Going to check behind like a set of queens. I think that's probably a pretty.
Sounds like checking range is just the way to go.
It's the simplest path for sure. Like it's a path that like it makes your strategy easiest to manage. In this instance, Hero does start out with a 4th, I believe. There they go. And they get called. So they bet a quarter. Turn is, ooh boy, we improved. We made a pair. The turn's a king of spades. So now the board is king, queen, 10 of spades, 8 of hearts. And I don't think we're leaping for joy on this card. Although we are somewhat happy, right? We can't be super sad. We did.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah. I mean, sorry, it's a spade, but come on, it's still a king.
Yeah,
Like,
you can't, beggars can't be choosers, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we're so happy that we're almost certainly going to check, I believe.
No. Oh, wait. What? I would actually bet this turn still.
Yeah, just going to
Yeah.
go bet turn,
Check
jam,
back river.
check back river.
Yeah. I think I would bet this turn, targeting like a lot of the pair plus draw. I think like villain just has so
Mm,
much pair plus
mm,
draw on this
mm.
board, right? That's just like king jack, queen jack, jack 10, maybe 8 9, 10 9. Like all those hands just have to call facing a quarter on the
Sure.
turn. And maybe don't call facing a river bet. Like queen jack probably doesn't call facing, a river bet, even if
Yeah.
we check back the turn, right? But they'll definitely call a quarter here. So I think I just quarter here and fold to check raise. Feel very, very good about folding to check raise. Like do we have flushes here? Maybe not.
Ace five.
We have like ace, we
five of
have
spades,
straights, we have sets.
we have
Yeah,
the
we have
ace
hands
five
that
of
can call.
spades. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We have like sets and stuff. Hands that have equity versus flushes and straights. So it's not like, it's not like bet folding ace king here
We have
is
sets. Yeah, like
yeah.
yeah.
So bet folding ace king here doesn't feel bad. I also think that like their check raise range on king queen 10 8 is just like good luck finding enough bluffs to like make me feel bad about check folding ace king on this turn. So
Really
I think I
hard to
just
punish
quarter
it.
the
Yeah.
yeah, I think I just quarter the turn again and plan on checking back the river.
Yeah, they need to be. I don't even know what honestly they could be raising with, like jacks with a spade. Like they'd have to be turning a pair into a bluff to even like approach having enough low equity hands, and the like jacks with a spade just is going to get such a good price facing like a quarter that they actually have to go against their incentives of calling,
Just realizing. Yeah.
of just calling to realize to raise, and that just isn't going to happen. Humans just don't do that. So yeah, I really like the strat here, just betting the turn and then
Stick out another 11 big blinds. Yeah.
Yeah, stick it out.
Ah. Ooh.
Well,
Okay.
good news,
okay.
bad news.
This is good.
Hero check behind. However, Hero made trips on the river, so now we have like a very clear, the clearest of clear value bets. They're 65.4 in the pot. Hero's got 65.3. So actually, Hero set up perfect SPR, right? It's 1/10 of a big blind less than the pot. Yeah, just sizing selection here on the river.
All of it.
All she wrote, all the money.
Yeah. I think we can incredibly target hands like king jack. I don't know what hand like ace queen or queen jack does, but let's find out. Stick all the money in and find out.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. I think there's really only one sizing option here. What's actually going to happen is that the hero in this hand thought there were two sizing options instead of one, and they chose half pot on the river. So this is going to be the final hand. So we'll talk about why this size specifically is not super great. The reason, the main reason is like, what happens when you bet the size and villain has queens full and check the river?
Or do they just have a trap, right? Not even queens full. Like if they just decide to check all their flushes, straights, and
Right.
boats on the board pairing river, which is not that crazy. Like what do they do?
Yeah,
They
like
just rip it in.
they rip it in every time, right? So all the hands that actually beat you jam, and then all the hands that you're beating call. So you win the minimum and lose the maximum by choosing this size and giving villain the option to check jam the river. When you should just jam it and not let this villain have this optional river 2-bet.
Yeah, we have that's the term that we use in the CPG Wolf CFP for like these types of spots and using bet sizes like this is that you're setting up what we call the optional 2-bet game, right? Like you're giving player 7 8 8 4 the option to jam with their good hands and the option to just check call with their bluff catchers, right? And so like what we prefer is that we just jam, and if they have a good hand, we lose the same amount anyways, and if they have a bluff catcher, they end up losing more. And so most of the time you want to avoid setting up the optional 2-bet or giving the optional 2-bet option to your opponents.
Agreed. Yep. And good stuff. Want to thank Jonathan Little and the Poker Coaching team for having us here on Tactical Tuesday. Hopefully we'll do it one day again in the near future. Hit the like button. Head over to our YouTube at Chasing Poker Greatness and check out Tactical Tuesday. We do this every week, not for an hour and not really live, but we do we do this every single week. And yeah, thanks for listening. One final call to action, one final plug. Going to be launching a course at PokerCoaching. Took me 2 months to do my portion of the advanced cash game course. It was lots of pain, but I completed it, and I think it's going to be pretty good. Somebody said finish the hand, so
people need to know.
They need to know what happens. Well, looks like the villain's tanking.
Oh,
and they call and they muck.
Can we see what they called? Can we see what we got called?
We can. It's global poker. Like, just be happy that you got to see the replay.
Oh man, I'm curious if sizing down actually had an impact. You know, did they call with like jacks here, or like, you know, a 10, or
could be? Who knows? But in my experience, just jam.
Yeah, what would be really sad to see is they just call it with king jack, right? And like that's what has you, has you like face palming at the end of the hand or whatever.
Yep, agreed. All right, so thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next week. I just stole John's tagline by accident. John, you want to give it again, or is it?
Yeah. I'll try again. See you next week.
All right. See you guys next week.